Um, I'd like to share my screen.
You do have co-host permission,
Okay.
so it should be good.
Awesome. All right. So over the next few minutes, Mark and I will be talking just a little bit about the SFU library migration and upgrade from Drupal 6 to Islandora 8. We're in the process now of doing it and won't have a demo for you today, maybe next time. My role has mostly been in as a project manager, so balancing all the work that has to be done and working with our vendor. And moving forward, I'll be doing a little bit of site building. So we'll try to cover all of these bullet points over the next few minutes, and hopefully we get it all covered. So where we started, Drupal 6, very much end of life, so capital Y yikes. The site currently has over 12,000 PCs and about 5,000 plus published works, so conference presentations, articles, that sort of thing. We have a integration with our own in-house custom-built thesis registration system, and that will continue into the next iteration of Summit. We are working with Catalyst in New Zealand to migrate and upgrade the site, and they are currently working on helping us update to Drupal 9, as Drupal 8, as most of you know, is end of life in November. So that's kind of a priority. And if you want to see the site as it looks now before the upgrade in all its glory, the URL is there. So data cleanup, a very important job, not to be overlooked and underestimated. We spent a fair bit of time before the migration started just going through all of the data. Basically, anything that a human can touch and enter by free text over the years is going to have many variations. So we spent a fair bit of time looking for and standardizing a lot of the data. One of the things that I learned after the fact was that OpenRefine might have been a much better tool to use. I used Google Spreadsheets and filters, and with over 18,000 rows of content, it definitely took a lot of time to do the data cleanup. One example here that we're still have to deal with is the bullet that says 1,400 plus supervisors with a single letter instead of a family name or a given name. That was from a previous migration to the Drupal 6 site years ago, and we have these supervisors who only have a letter instead of their name. So we are going to hire some students to manually look up each and every item and add in manually the full name. So that's outstanding. But there's just so much to do, and it's been an experience, and I think Mark will have a bit to say about that as well. Because we were in Drupal, going from Drupal 6 to Islandora 8 for metadata has been a little bit easier than it might be otherwise. We didn't have to deal with trying to deal with mods or MADs metadata. We already have Drupal fields, so we're using a combination of taxonomies and Drupal fields. And you can see some of them here. And the nice thing, of course, in this is that the faceting will work really nicely in the new site. And I'm going to hand it over to Mark because he has a fair bit to cover. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you. So this slide is just kind of a brief list of some of the challenges we faced. I guess one of them was that source website, the current one, if you go to https summit.svu.ca, is really fragile. It's a Drupal 6 site that's really old. And a couple of things that we experienced were that, you might say, well, if you want a CSV export of your site, just use views. Then we couldn't do that. Drupal 6 views just wasn't working for us. So we had to write a set of custom scripts to export the data. Not a big deal, but just a hassle. When you have a perfectly good built-in CSV exporting tool in Drupal, but it wasn't satisfy you. Also, for some reason that we couldn't figure out, and we didn't spend the time to figure out during the migration, was that even though files were supposedly available to anonymous users, Catalyst was fetching them directly from Drupal. And what they did, we didn't export the files first. Their migration used the HTTP requests to get the files. Many of them just didn't work for some reason out of context. The big kicker was that SFU Central IT clamped down substantially on security protocols for servers that were in the SFU cloud, including our staging and production server for this migration, such that the Catalyst's standard deployment tools no longer worked, and there's no possible way of getting them to work. So because of this clamp down is a very rough term. I just mean that they enforced using a VPN and other things like that that basically didn't let Catalyst do its job. We had to shift to Docker, and that was a problem because we didn't plan to use Docker because we didn't have any experience with Oil or Docker. So we all had to learn very rapidly how to use Oil. And we brought in some additional resources to help us there. Another kind of major problem or challenge with the migration was one of our local library IT staff, a key staff member in this migration, suddenly became unavailable to us for 2 months. So we had to figure out how to work without him. And we hit a couple of issues with Islandora itself. The things I just described were nothing to do with Islandora. They're all random things that happened to us. But Islandora, some things, the first 3 things in this list, I won't go through them, but the first 3 have issues on the Islandora GitHub issue repo. We're able to kind of work around in various ways. The last one, just a kind of warning for those of you who are planning to implement taxonomies in a large way. To view a large taxonomy, like one of our person taxonomy has over 25,000 entries, and it just consumes crazy amounts of RAM on your Drupal server. So be prepared for that, to be prepared to provision your server such that you can allocate more RAM when you need to view and use these very large taxonomies. James, I think, yes. Oh, go back to preservation. Oh, not showing up.
Nope.
Oh.
Just
Okay.
give me a second. I think I know what the problem is.
Okay. So I'll talk while you're doing that. Now, thanks very much. Now that we have a proper Drupal IR, we can implement our preservation action plan for IR content, and that is, in a nutshell, to create bags, a bag for each object, using our bagger, and do this in a scheduled manner. And we will then take those bags and deposit them in our preservation storage, shared preservation storage network, which is called Westvault. Westvault is a service of the Western Canadian Universities Consortium called COPL. And already many sites, including BC ELN's ARCA, do this, but we'll be doing it in Summit as we move forward. We're able to. Next slide, please. Thank you. Some of the things that we're doing with this new site are that we are going to be using it for some kinds of research data, specifically research data sets that are attached to theses. So this IR is our primary thesis repository, and a copy of record for a thesis will live in this repository. And we have a number of theses every year that come into us with data sets attached, and these could be videos, these could be CSV or Excel files, and all sorts of stuff. We are using OAI PMH heavily, and we're going to be customizing the OAI PMH gateway provider such that we can be harvested by Theses Canada and by OpenAIRE. Neither of these uses the standard Dublin Core. OAI PMH wrapper format, and Catalyst is configuring OAI PMH so that we can satisfy the requirements of both of those aggregators. And the third thing is we want to integrate items in Summit with the SFU Central Research Expertise Engine. This is a service provided by SFU's Vice President Research International to highlight research outputs of SFU faculty that go beyond just the Summit repository. You can't see it here very well, but the third little tab that's down in the above those two entries, it says SFU Summit. And what we're going to be doing once we go into production is provide a feed, a JSON feed, based on this researcher's SFU ID that will then show all the items of this researcher, in this case, Steve Dodge, in Summit. So it'll be one tab along there with Google Scholar and Web of Science and sources like that. Back to you, Janice.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my mic. So I think we're probably out of time, but there's just a screenshot of where we're going and what our site is hopefully, not hopefully, what it's going to look like. And I think, Jenna, we're probably at our 10 minutes.